You're not stuck because you're weak. You're stuck because your mind is undisciplined. That's the truth no one dares to tell you. Have you ever wondered why, no matter how hard you try, you still feel like you're behind, like something invisible is holding you back? It's not your lack of talent. It's not the world being unfair. It's your thoughts, running wild, untrained, unchecked. While your dreams are burning inside, your mind fragile and noisiest, too easily shaken. Most people are slaves to their own emotions. But you're here because you're ready to become the master. In the next few minutes, you'll discover how to build a mind so sharp, so calm, so unshakably focused that fear and doubt will have no place left to hide. This is not about motivation. It's about mental warfare, about building an inner fortress so powerful your mere presence commands respect without saying a word. If you've ever struggled to silence the noise, if you've ever felt your emotions hijack your progress, if you've ever wondered why others seem unshaken while you fall apart, then what you're about to hear will become your turning point. Because in this journey, you'll learn why self-mastery is the greatest power you'll ever hold, how to turn discipline into your sword and focus into your shield, and how to rewire your belief system until doubt becomes impossible. Stay with me. The answer isn't out there. It's in the way you train your mind. 1. Unbreakable belief, the bedrock of greatness. Most people walk through life blind to the immense power buried within them. They carry dreams but not conviction. They wish but they do not declare. But there is a silent force when awakened turns the impossible into routine. Absolute belief. Unshakable, non-negotiable, final. Deep inside your mind lies a vault of potential that no one can access for you. Not intelligence, not background, not your upbringing. Only belief has the key. It is not genius that builds empires, not wealth, not connections. Those are mere accessories to the real cause. The root of greatness is a mind that refuses to doubt. Let that settle for a moment. Because the truth is brutal. Your life either expands or collapses depending on what you believe is possible. Doubt shrinks your world. Certainty expands it beyond the horizon. When belief becomes your default state, barriers break, resistance weakens, reality bends in your favor. Mountains become molehills, fears become fuel, and every no you've ever heard dissolves under the weight of your inner certainty. So I ask you, what are you truly believing about yourself right now? Are you building a palace on rock-solid faith? Or are you hoping to fly while tethered to chains of hesitation? Greatness never arrives by chance. It is summoned by a mind trained to never doubt its own power. Unshakable belief is not arrogance. It is spiritual authority. It is inner sovereignty. It is the flame that melts down limits. And when you ignite it, the world no longer challenges your path. It yields to it. 2. Shattering mental chains, unleashing the power within. You've been lied to. Since birth, you've been conditioned to accept ceilings you never agreed to. Be realistic, they said. Know your place, they whispered. And so you did. But here's the truth that no one told you. Most of the limits you obey don't actually exist. They were never real, only rehearsed. You were never too unqualified, never too late, never too small, only too programmed to believe you were. The world doesn't chain you, your thinking does. And that's the battlefield where your war begins. Because belief, once corrupted, becomes your cage. But belief, when rewired, becomes your wings. So how do you rise from the ashes of false identity? How do you forge unshakable confidence in a world built to break it? It begins with this. You must become the guardian of your mind. Audit every passing thought. Interrogate every inner voice. What stories are you silently agreeing to? I'm not ready. I'm not good enough. People like me don't make it. When those whispers appear, don't reason with them. Replace them. Ruthlessly. Repeatedly. Relentlessly. I'm not good enough becomes, I am more than prepared for this moment. I'll try, evolves into, I will succeed, without hesitation, without apology. Stop negotiating with weakness. Speak to yourself like a general, not a beggar. Make declarations, not requests. History has proven this truth. Conviction makes ordinary men extraordinary. Look no further than Clarence Augustus Bartlett, a son of a coal miner, mocked, dismissed, defeated 17 times. Yet in 1962, he stood not in shame but in power before the British Parliament. His voice didn't tremble. His resolve didn't waver. He said, "My father taught me that a man's worth isn't measured by where he begins, but by whether he refuses to accept defeat as his end." End quote. 6 months later, he didn't just prove them wrong. He rewrote the future for generations, opening the gates of education to working-class children across an entire nation. So I ask you now, what belief are you still carrying that was never yours to begin with? What cage are you reinforcing with your own voice? Because until you challenge it, you'll remain loyal to the chains that were never meant for you. But the moment you rise, the moment you reject the script, the moment you speak with unshakable conviction, that's the moment your life begins to change. But let me ask you right now, are you still living under laws that don't exist? Have you mistaken passing struggles for permanent truths? Have you allowed a moment of resistance to become your identity? Because make no mistake, the only real prison is the one you refuse to question. The dreams you shelved, the goals you called unrealistic, the life you secretly crave but don't dare to pursue, they're not beyond reach. They're simply waiting for your belief to catch up. And here's the shift no one warns you about. Once you begin to operate from unwavering conviction, the entire atmosphere around you changes. Some will be drawn to your energy. Others will be disturbed by it. People feel when someone has stepped out of fear. They sense the silence in youth, the absence of internal conflict. They may not understand it, but they will respond to it. Because conviction is magnetic. It pulls the right people closer and pushes the average ones into discomfort. When the world is content with mediocrity, and you stand there, unshaken, demanding greatness, you become a mirror that exposes their compromise. But let's be clear, this kind of power doesn't emerge by accident. You don't stumble into this level of belief. You build it, deliberately, daily. Every morning you must rehearse your greatness, not in vague hope, but in vivid precision. See your success so clearly, your subconscious mind believes it's already happened. Feed it with words that ignite your strength until doubt has no room left to survive. And if you ever waver, study those who came before you, those who faced deeper odds, darker nights, and louder rejection, but never stopped believing. Their legacy is not luck, it is proof of what belief can build. So now, I ask you, are you prepared to construct a mind so fortified, so certain, that even failure cannot find its way in? Are you ready to become the version of yourself that others will no longer recognize? Because once this transformation begins, you won't go back. You can't. This journey begins with a choice. Will you keep surrendering to illusions, or will you finally claim the limitless power that's always been yours? 3. The discipline of daily mastery, the true engine of greatness. Greatness is never struck like a match. It is carved inch by inch, day by day, through sacred routines few are willing to honor. You've been told to wait for motivation, to feel inspired first, then act. But the truth? Those who rise don't wait for permission from emotion. They obey discipline. Every historic breakthrough, every legend remembered, began with something deceptively unremarkable. A set of habits performed with unwavering loyalty, regardless of mood or circumstance. Do not be fooled. Champions are not born with a gift. They are built from daily repetition, forged under the weight of consistency. They do what others won't, until one day they can do what others can't. Discipline doesn't just shape your schedule. It shapes your soul. And here's why it matters more than any talent or opportunity. Your mind, like your body, responds to challenge. What you train strengthens. What you ignore decays. Just as resistance builds muscle, deliberate difficulty builds mental steel. That ancient truth still stands. We are what we practice. Not sometimes. Not when it's easy. Always. Excellence isn't a peak moment. It's a pattern. A habit so ingrained, it feels like breathing. And when others witness that rhythm, When they see you operate with militant precision while they flinch and hesitate, they don't just respect it, they fear it. Because your consistency reflects their compromise. So, how do you rise to this level? You begin by creating sacred rituals that are not optional, non negotiable, non emotional. You live by principle, not by preference. Wake up while the world sleeps. Guard the first hour like your legacy depends on it, because it does. Feed your mind with what stretches it. Sit in stillness that anchors your focus. Write down the battle plan for the day before the battle begins. And then before noon, do what discomfort begs you to avoid. Run toward the resistance. Why? Because that act rewires your brain. You teach yourself at the neurological level that you lead, and fear follows. Hiroshi Yamaoka knew this. He didn't inherit success, he engineered it. While competitors were still sipping coffee and waiting for emails, he was 90 minutes deep into global market analysis every single morning for 12 years. 12 years. No exceptions. No excuses. Just the quiet thunder of repeated excellence. That's what transformed his failing factory in Tokyo into a global empire. So ask yourself, what will you do every day, no matter what? What routines will you elevate to the level of sacred law? Will you build a life based on fleeting moods, or on a system so strong it cannot be broken by feeling? Because in the end, your rituals are not just your habits. They are your destiny in disguise. 4. The power of relentless persistence. The force that bends reality. Let this truth echo in your mind. Dreamers fantasize, doers persist, and only one of them changes the world. There is a reason why some men and women rise while others retreat. They possess a quality the world fears and few can rival, an iron will that never concedes. Success in its purest form is not born of ease. It's forged in rejection. It grows in the soil of failure. And it blooms only for those who have sworn never to stop, no matter how many doors slam, how many voices doubt, or how many nights fall silent. Scan through history. Every major accomplishment, every invention, every movement, every revolution was built upon a mountain of rejection slips, public ridicule, and personal despair. What made the difference? They kept going. While others surrendered, they stepped forward one more time. And that step changed everything. There is something unnerving, almost frightening about a person who won't quit. Because it doesn't matter what obstacles you throw at them. They keep coming. Not because they enjoy the pain, but because they see failure not as a signal to stop, but as data to decode. Clues. Adjustment. Leçon. They don't take it personally, they take it strategically. That mindset, my friend, separates those who simply survive from those who reshape the landscape of possibility. Ask yourself honestly, how many times have you stopped just one step short of the breakthrough? Because make no mistake, victory is often just on the other side of your final test. Those who understand this don't just tolerate discouragement, they outgrow it. Their refusal to collapse under pressure radiates a presence, a quiet, unshakable power that throws weaker minds into disarray. It's not arrogance, it's inevitability. Now the question becomes, how do you build this kind of unstoppable endurance? You begin by rewriting your relationship with failure. Stop treating it like a verdict, start treating it like a mentor. Every setback has something to teach you, if you're willing to listen. When resistance appears, don't collapse. Ask yourself with precision, what pattern is this revealing? What must I learn that I haven't yet mastered? This is not about denial. It's about interpretation. You must develop what psychologists call a resilient explanatory style, one that isolates the obstacle, sees it as temporary, and refuses to globalize defeat into identity. Margaret Sullivan understood this at a level most never will. She was denied not once, not twice, but 17 times by hospital boards across the country. Yet she never labeled those rejections as failure. She called them research. She documented each refusal, each critique, each hesitation, not as wounds, but as maps, blueprints that revealed what the system feared, what it misunderstood, and where she could break through. And break through she did, transforming American healthcare. not in spite of rejection, but because of it. So now I ask you, what if your last setback wasn't the end? What if it was your final instruction before the leap? Will you retreat into comfort? Or will you rise equipped with wisdom only the battle can give? Because the ones who terrify the world are not the loudest. They are the ones who keep showing up long after Average has gone home. Not because the world welcomed her, but because she refused to be defined by no. Now ask yourself, are you letting a temporary disappointment brand you with a permanent identity? Have you confused the normal resistance of growth with proof that your vision is unachievable? Because here's the truth. Most people don't fail because the goal was impossible. They fail because they stop one day too soon. The next breakthrough, the next life-altering result, the moment where everything begins to shift, could be waiting just beyond your current threshold for pain. And when you cross that invisible line, something begins to shift in your environment. People notice. They react. Some admire you with silent reverence. Others flinch deeply disturbed. Because your refusal to collapse, your determination to continue where they surrendered, challenges the very stories they use to justify quitting. You become living proof that excuses are not truth, that comfort is not destiny, and that persistence alone can fracture the strongest illusion of limitation. And make no mistake, persistence is not stubborn repetition of broken tactics. It is the mature strategic refusal to abandon the goal while constantly upgrading the path. Thomas Edison didn't fail Sabuluri dimes. He discovered 10,000 ways that didn't work. And with every misfire, his resilience expanded. His focus sharpened. His certainty grew teeth. You see, for the mind that truly understands persistence, obstacles don't mean stop. They mean adjust. The question now is this. Can you commit to enduring 10 straight rejections, 10 hard lessons, 10 doors slammed in your face, without surrendering your mission? Will you continue walking forward when your ego screams for retreat? Can you transform the sting of disappointment into the fire of refinement? Because the mind that terrifies the average is not the one that never fails, but the one that never folds. It sees every obstacle not as an attack, but as an instruction, a signal to shift, to learn, to evolve. This mind doesn't complain. It calculates. It adapts. It moves forward, always forward, because it understands. Success is not the reward for ease. It is the prize for persistence. 5. The collective mind. Power through strategic intelligence. Throughout history, the individuals who rewrote entire industries, redefined nations, or reshaped the future were never alone. They understood a secret that average achievers ignore. Even the sharpest mind is bound by its own blind spots. Perspective is power, and perspective is limited in isolation. You may possess insight. You may have relentless drive. But without complementary minds, your vision remains only partially seen, and your breakthroughs only partially born. Those who rise to unprecedented heights are not necessarily more brilliant. They are more connected strategically, intentionally, relentlessly. They understand that when aligned minds converge under a shared purpose, something almost supernatural begins to form, a force greater than the sum of its parts. This isn't philosophy. It's mathematics of the mind. Two aligned thinkers don't add power. They multiply it. So what gives this principle such massive leverage? It creates mental synergy fusion of strengths, experiences, and perspectives that unlock solutions the lone thinker could never access. It invites conflict not to divide, but to refine. And in that friction, brilliance is born. Study any world-changing invention, any monumental shift in society, and behind it you'll find not a lone genius, but a web of minds woven together with common intent. If you wish to rise beyond the ordinary, you must master this principle, and mastery begins with humility. First, assess your terrain. What are your gifts and where do you lack? What angles do you miss? What blind spots weaken your plans? Then do what most never dare to do. Seek those who are stronger where you are weak, not to compete, but to complete the system. Because synergy is not born from similarity. It emerges from carefully selected differences aligned toward a single mission. But don't mistake connection for power. Proximity means nothing without purpose. You must build operational unity based on mutual respect, clear outcomes, and disciplined collaboration. This is not a coffee chat. This is not networking. This is the formation of a mental war room. Create a rhythm. Establish rituals. Structure your sessions with precision. Define the battlefield before the ideas arrive, and then watch what unfolds. Look to the example of Alexander Westbrook. Australia's agricultural sector was in disarray. Productivity collapsed. Solutions failed. Rather than retreat into isolated effort, he summoned the minds of multiple disciplines: meteorologists, soil scientists, engineers, economists, logistics experts. Each brought a different lens. Each exposed new angles. And together, they formed what one analyst called an intellectual engine that transformed a dying industry into a world leader during its worst drought in recorded history. This is the power of mental alliance. This is the mind that no longer fights alone. And in today's world of complexity, the lone warrior will not survive. But the strategist with a powerful counsel, he will thrive. So I ask you now, have you been trying to conquer mountains with a one-man army? Are you still carrying the myth that independence is strength? What exponential leap is waiting? If only you dared to build your mastermind, because the mind that terrifies through its strength is not only the one with clarity, but the one surrounded by minds just as sharp, just as relentless, and just as committed to the same unstoppable outcome. Each expert at Westbrook's table faced the same problem, but none saw it the same way. Meteorologists spoke of rain patterns. Economists highlighted trade flows. Engineers broke down mechanical failures. And from that collision consensus came innovation. Westbrook later said, "Breakthroughs weren't born from my mind alone, but from minds that dared to clash until clarity emerged." Within 5 years, during the worst drought on record, that cross-disciplinary intelligence boosted national crop yields by 73%. Not in theory, in reality. Now I ask you directly, are you still trying to solve complex problems alone? Are you clinging to the illusion that independence is power, while rejecting the fact that interdependence is exponential force? You may be capable, but your vision is filtered through a single lens, and what remains unseen in your blind spots could be the exact insight that changes everything. Because when you truly activate mastermind dynamics, something astonishing happens. Your pace accelerates. Your problem solving feels uncanny. Your results disturb your competition. They look on confused, trapped in their singular approach, while you move at a velocity they can't explain. And here's why. Most people are not limited by intelligence. They are imprisoned by ego. They reject outside ideas, not because those ideas lack value, but because accepting them requires humility. And to the fragile mind, collaboration feels like weakness, when in truth, it is the ultimate strength. But if you dare to assemble minds that challenge, stretch, and refine you, you create something few will ever possess. Intellectual synergy fueled by shared ambition. That's how you multiply capability. That's how you create what looks like magic, but is really just disciplined collaboration. Still be warned. Mastermind excellence doesn't come from random groupings or shallow exchanges. It demands deliberate design. Choose your circle with surgical precision. Look not only for brilliance, but for integrity. For those who elevate discourse, not dominate it. For those who contribute with respect and challenge with purpose. Avoid friction disguised as creativity. Avoid ego battles masked as high standards. Structure the alliance. Clear roles. Equaler time. Shared outcomes. Rapid implementation. Because the mastermind is not a gathering. It is a council of transformation. And now the invitation is yours to answer. Can you name 3 people who possess what you lack, whose minds would sharpen yours in ways solitude never could? Will you initiate the alliance, not just with enthusiasm, but with structure, with vision, with a promise of mutual elevation? Because the mind that terrifies through its strength is not the mind that thinks alone, but the one that dares to unite and rises tenfold through strategic connection. 6. Mastering fear through deliberate action. There is one quiet force that separates those who change the world from those who merely admire it from a distance: their relationship with fear. It's not the absence of fear that defines greatness. That's a myth. The men and women who perform extraordinary acts, who build legacies and lead revolutions, feel fear just as intensely as anyone else. What sets them apart is this: they move toward what terrifies them, not away from it. That behavior, though counterintuitive, is what builds something close to psychological invincibility. It's not magic, not genetic. It's built brick by brick by choosing discomfort on purpose. Why does this strategy carry so much power? Because fear isn't some eternal monster. It's simply a shadow cast over parts of your mind you haven't yet claimed. And just like every skill you've developed, every strength you now possess, it all started in the unknown. Every ounce of capability was once wrapped in awkwardness and anxiety. But you didn't stop there. You practiced, you repeated, and eventually what once seemed impossible became natural. That's the key. People who grow continuously don't wait for fear to disappear. They face it methodically. They expand their comfort zone one deliberate act at a time, while everyone else stays locked in the prison of their preferences. When someone witnesses a person walking headfirst into the very thing others run from, it creates a different kind of presence. Not louder, but heavier. Not arrogant, but grounded. There's something undeniably commanding about a person who moves straight into fear instead of avoiding it. If you want to create that presence in your own life, start here. Take inventory of your fears. List them out not in theory, but specifically. What situations tighten your chest? What conversations make you shrink? What opportunities do you avoid because they just don't feel right? Once you've named them, order them by intensity from the mildly uncomfortable to the utterly terrifying. Then begin your journey through what psychologists call progressive exposure. Start small. Choose one fear-inducing action each day, something just above your current comfort zone, and complete it no matter how anxious you feel. Don't wait for courage. Do it because it scares you. Because the goal isn't just the outcome, it's the act of defiance itself. That's where transformation begins. Document what happens. You'll notice something fascinating. The fear is almost always louder before the action than during it. Anxiety is an exaggerator, and the moment you act, the illusion collapses. This was the strategy of Victoria Peaton, a woman who once suffered from debilitating social anxiety and yet went on to become a defining voice in British telecommunications. Her rise didn't happen by accident. It was constructed through what she called her discomfort curriculum. For 5 years straight, every Thursday afternoon, she scheduled exactly what frightened her the most. Whether it was public speaking, negotiating with powerful executives, or confronting difficult media questions, she didn't avoid them. She organized her life around them. That level of intentional confrontation reshaped her nervous system. What once triggered avoidance eventually triggered engagement. She trained her brain to interpret fear not as a stop sign, but as a signal. This is where I grow. So the real question is, what about you? What if fear isn't your enemy, but your invitation? What if the path to your greatest strength runs directly through the things you've spent your life dodging? You don't need to conquer every fear today. You just need to take one step toward it, then another. And if you keep moving, fear won't disappear. It will kneel. Because the mind that dominates the world is not the one that avoids discomfort. It is the one that walks into it and purpose. That weekly ritual of discomfort transformed Victoria Peaton's nervous system. What once made her hands tremble and her voice crack eventually became her field of mastery. Through deliberate exposure, she built the kind of executive presence that her competitors couldn't explain and couldn't match. She didn't just expand her comfort zone, she obliterated it. Now pause for a moment and ask yourself, are you currently avoiding experiences that could accelerate your development? Have you mistaken the sting of discomfort for real danger? What untapped potential still sleeps inside you, hidden behind excuses dressed up as caution? Here's what most never realize. Fear, when confronted repeatedly, loses its grip. That wall of resistance you feel right before taking action, it shrinks with every step forward. Every time you prove to yourself that you can act despite anxiety, your brain rewires. What used to scream threat begins to signal challenge accepted. Most people don't understand this mechanism. They build entire lives around avoidance. They protect themselves from discomfort like it's poison, not realizing they are slowly trading future power for present peace. But when you're willing to embrace short-term friction for long-term growth, something shifts. Your rate of evolution increases. Your edge sharpens. And the people around you, those clinging to comfort, start to feel the quiet pressure of your momentum. Because courage, real courage, is not the absence of fear. It's the refusal to obey it. It's showing up anyway, over and over, until your nervous system no longer flinches at discomfort but welcomes it. Each time you walk through fear, it becomes a memoria proof point stored deep in your psychology. These moments of proof begin to stack, forming a new identity. You stop being the person who shrinks from challenge. You become the one who seeks it out. You become someone who runs into fear, not from it. That's how leaders are forged, not through inspiration, but through repetition, through the daily habit of saying, I'm scared, and I'm going anyway. So now, here's your mission. Identify 3 fears, real ones. Not minor doubts, but the big ones. The ones that have kept you stuck. Write them down. Then design your own discomfort protocol. One challenge at a time. Manageable, repeatable, escalating. Because the mind that dominates life is not the one that waits for fear to pass. It's the one that interprets fear as a signal to move forward. The invitation isn't to retreat. It's to advance. Deliberately. Relentlessly. Fear becomes your compass pointing. You toward power. 7. The power of strategic silence. The presence that commands without speaking. In a world obsessed with being heard, something rare and profoundly magnetic emerges from those who choose silence. Not silence born from fear or uncertainty, but from strength, from strategy. There is a difference between those who influence and those who simply interrupt. It's not found in volume, charisma, or linguistic flair. True power, the kind that halts rooms and changes minds, comes from something quieter, the disciplined mastery of when not to speak. This kind of silence is not passive. It's calculated. It's intentional. It is the deliberate space between thoughts where clarity is born and presence begins to take shape. Why is this restraint so powerful? Because we live in an age addicted to immediacy, where people feel the need to respond before they reflect, to post before they ponder. The world rewards noise, but noise doesn't equal influence. Influence belongs to those who listen deeper, observe longer, and speak less but with far greater impact. While others drown in the rush of half-formed thoughts, the strategically silent individual becomes a sponge absorbing nuance, tracking energy shifts, and spotting what others miss. They don't react. They study. They wait. And when they finally speak, it's with clarity that cuts through confusion like a blade. Their words carry weight not because they're many, but because they're rare and rooted in reflection. So how do you build this kind of mental discipline in a culture of constant chatter? You begin with a foundational shift. Do not speak just to escape silence. Silence is not your enemy, it's your advantage. The next time a conversation pauses, resist the internal pressure to fill the void. Let it breathe. Let it stretch. And use that moment to observe what's truly unfolding beneath the surface. Then create a mental Filterra protocol that slows your response and sharpens its value. Before you speak, ask, am I adding insight or just adding sound? Have I considered other angles? What would I discover by listening just a little longer? These questions don't weaken your voice, they refine it. They turn casual conversation into strategic communication. They take you from being someone who talks to someone who commands attention without asking for it. Understand this. Silence isn't absence. It's architecture. It builds presence. It creates anticipation. It grants power to every word that follows. In fact, the most influential individuals in history weren't the loudest. They were the most intentional. They knew that when words are chosen with discipline, they become instruments of precision, not noise. So the challenge for you is this. Can you cultivate the kind of restraint that turns every sentence into substance? Can you develop the presence that listens more than it speaks? But when it speaks, the world listens, because the mind that terrifies through its strength is not the one that fills every silence, but the one that speaks only when silence is no longer enough. There was once a man named Raji Chandra Sekhar, a diplomat who didn't just negotiate treaties, rewired the rules of international dialogue. In high-stakes negotiations across rival Asian nations, he became known for something that felt radical in a room filled with pressure and politics: his silence. After each opposing representative finished speaking, Chandra would say nothing. For 45 long seconds, he sat still, unflinching, letting the air thicken. In those seconds, something subtle but powerful unfolded. The silence itself became a strategy. His opponents, unsettled by the pause, often spoke again. But this second round of speaking wasn't scripted. It was vulnerable, revealing. They'd unknowingly share insights, weaknesses, or positions they had intended to conceal. The silence drew the truth out, and with it came leverage. Those extended, intentional pauses became his signature tacticone that secured economic concessions previously labeled as untouchable. It wasn't volume that won the deal. It was restraint. It was the power of what wasn't said. So let me ask you, are you unknowingly weakening your influence by constantly needing to speak? Have you mistaken word count for wisdom? What opportunities are you missing because you're too eager to fill every gap with sound? When your relationship with silence shifts from avoidance to strategy, something extraordinary begins to happen. People listen more closely. Your words gain density. Your silence becomes anticipation. And others start to associate your voice not with noise, but with depth. Because whether they realize it or not, they begin to feel the weight of your pause. They recognize that your words are not rushed out in emotional impulse, but shaped by clarity, grounded in purpose. In contrast, most people speak reactively. They feel a thought form and out it comes. No space for refinement, no discipline of pause, just reaction in motion. But when you speak from deliberation rather than impulse, when your contributions emerge not from the need to be heard, but from the need to be effective, you command a different kind of respect without ever having to ask for it. Understand this clearly. Strategic silence is not withdrawal. It's not muting your voice. It's refining, it's selecting the moment, sculpting the message, delivering only what matters most. The most respected communicators don't speak the most. They speak the clearest, the sharpest, and the most intentionally. Their restraint creates space, and within that space, wisdom takes root. Impulsivity dies. Influence grows. So here's your invitation. In your next 3 important conversations, practice intentional silence. Let your ideas breathe. Let your intuition lead. Let others speak until they run out of noise. And when you do speak, do so with intention, not obligation. Because the mind that terrifies through its presence is not the one that talks to be heard. It's the one that speaks when silence has made the room ready for substance. 8. Singular focus, mental imagery, and the art of productive discomfort. There's a quiet force that defines those who make history, those who disrupt industries, master impossible skills, or carve innovations from thin air. It isn't talent alone, nor is it access to time, luck, or money. It's their relationship with attention. While most people live in a state of constant mental scattering, drifting from notification to meeting, from task to impulse, the elite operate on another level entirely. They treat their focus as sacred, unbreakable, singular, because they understand a profound truth. Attention is the most precious currency in the world, and where focus flows, achievement grows. The difference between ordinary progress and exponential breakthrough is not how hard someone works, but how purely they channel their energy. When you aim your mental force at one high-value target with total intensity, the results can appear superhuman to those who are constantly distracted. Most people wear busyness like a badge. They confuse activity with advancement. They dabble in dozens of goals, scatter their willpower, and wonder why nothing compounds. But the ones who achieve the impossible, they do fewer things and do them with ruthless precision. That's why sustained focus feels intimidating to the average person. When someone commits deeply to one singular pursuit and protects that pursuit like their life depends on it generates a magnetic presence. People feel it. They may not understand it, but they can't ignore it. So how do you cultivate this level of concentration in a world that's built to break it? First, reject the myth of multitasking. It is not a skill. It is a silent productivity killer. Neurological research is clear. Switching between tasks creates cognitive drag and robs you of depth. It gives you the illusion of progress while leaving real results untouched. To reverse this, implement time blocking designated hours where your entire mental ecosystem is directed at one mission. During these blocks, eliminate all digital clutter. No notifications, no messages, no split focus. Start with 30-minute intervals and gradually build to 90-minute sessions of deep work. These become your sacred hours non-negotiable time frames in which mastery is pursued and momentum is built. This approach is how Eliza Thornton, once a quiet drafting assistant with little formal training, became a pioneering voice in American architectural design. When asked about her rapid ascent, she didn't credit genius or luck, she credited structure. For 30 years, she said, I protected the hours between 5 and 9 like they were gold. I refused to dilute those hours. They were untouchable. While her peers fragmented their attention across meetings, calls, and constant distractions, Thornton poured 4 hours each day into one thing, deep, undisturbed creation. And the results changed her entire industry. Now ask yourself, are you giving your most important goal the level of devotion it requires? Or are you letting it drown beneath a tide of lesser priorities? This principle doesn't apply only to external work. It applies to inner vision too, because paired with singular focus is another silent weapon, visualization. Before you build it in the world, you must first construct it vividly in your mind. Those who achieve at the highest levels don't just see what they want, they live it internally, over and over, until the subconscious believes it's inevitable. They don't just plan, they feel, they imagine. They rehearse their future until the body and brain unite around it. And here's where the third element enters, strategic discomfort. If you want your focus and vision to lead to real evolution, you must be willing to seek difficulty. You must walk directly into challenge and not as punishment, but as practice. Success is not a smooth road, but it is a predictable one. Focus with intensity. Visualize with clarity. Act with courage even when discomfort rises. These 3 disciplines form the core of creative transformation. Together, they separate those who remain busy from those who become legendary. Because the mind that terrifies through its strength isn't just sharp, it is disciplined, it is directed, and it is unshakable in pursuit of one meaningful outcome. Eliza Thornton's sacred hours, honored without exception for 3 decades, weren't just rituals of work. They became the womb of innovation. From that well of uninterrupted concentration emerged design principles that didn't merely compete, they reset the standards for an entire industry. This is the compounding power of deep work. Focused, repeated, unshakable. Now turn the lens inward. Are you fragmenting your potential through constant mental switching? Do you mistake motion for momentum? Does your schedule feel full, yet your results feel shallow? Most people today live in an exhausting loop of surface-level action bouncing from message to meeting, alert to impulse, spinning wheels without gaining ground. The tragedy isn't laziness. It's distraction disguised as diligence. But when you build the capacity for sustained singular focus, when your attention becomes a tool instead of a casualty, something remarkable begins to unfold. What takes others months, you finish in weeks. What overwhelms them, you simplify. What intimidates them, you execute. To the distracted mind, this kind of progress looks supernatural, but it's not magic, it's math. It's the compounding force of uninterrupted energy directed toward a single outcome. This level of productivity isn't about time, it's about attention. Because attention, not time, is the real non-renewable resource. And in this age of digital noise, the rarest skill is the ability to protect your focus like you would guard your wealth. Interruption isn't a mild inconvenience. It is a thief, a slow, invisible siphon of your brilliance. You must begin treating your attention as sacred territory. Set boundaries like your future depends on it, because it does. Create time blocks that are off limits. Silence the outside world. Step into your task with the reverence of someone crafting a legacy. And now, ask yourself directly, What is the one goal, the one objective that, if pursued with relentless focus, would create the greatest transformation in your life? Identify it, protect it, build around it. Because the mind that conquers isn't busy, it is clear. It chooses one mountain and climbs it. But focus alone is not enough. To master the outer world, you must also train the inner world, which brings us to the next truth you understand, the art of visualization. Behind every great achievement lies more than action. There lies imagery rehearsed, precise, powerful, a mental blueprint constructed with such vivid detail that the subconscious has no choice but to believe it's real. What separates those who realize their ambitions from those who endlessly dream? It's not always greater effort, more talent, or better opportunity. It's the quality of their internal rehearsal. They don't just hope, they program. Through structured daily visualization, they embed their future into their present. They see it. They feel it. They become it internally long before the world sees the result. This mental conditioning creates a level of certainty that unnerves conventional thinkers. Because to most, belief is reactive. But to those who visualize with discipline, belief is engineered. So I ask you now, are you merely reacting to life? Or are you rehearsing the future you've chosen to create? Because the mind that terrifies through its strength is not just focused, it is programmed. And once programmed, it becomes unstoppable. Now, why does visualization done with precision and consistency unlock such staggering advantage? Because your subconscious mind, the invisible operator behind every decision and behavior, cannot distinguish between vividly imagined experience and actual physical reality. It responds not to what is true, but to what is believed to be true. And when you harness this neurological reality, you begin to reprogram your internal navigation system with remarkable accuracy. You no longer move toward your goals with mere effort. You move with certainty, as if you're returning to something already owned. When others see you pursuing an audacious goal with the quiet conviction of someone who already lives inside that future, they feel it. And they often can't explain it. But they are shaken by it, because there's something about a person who walks into their vision like it's already waiting there. That level of presence isn't forced, it's trained. So how do you implement this internal training system? Start by creating a daily protocol for visualization. Not casually, not occasionally. Ritualize it. Commit to a minimum of 20 minutes each day, ideally during your most neurologically receptive windows, just after waking and just before sleep. In these moments, your brain enters a theta wave state, the optimal zone for subconscious programming. And during those sessions, don't just think about your goals, live them. Visualize your desired outcome in high definition, from the inside out, not as a spectator, but through your own eyes. Feel the room, hear the sounds, smell the air. Experience the emotions coursing through your body. Create a multisensory mental simulation so vivid, your nervous system begins to encode it as truth. That's what Sébastien Renaud did. Deemed physically unfit by athletic experts, Renaud went on to dominate French track and field, breaking records others were genetically favored to hold. When asked about his ascent, he didn't speak of supplements or extra workouts. He spoke of mental immersion. For 3 years, he said, I won mentally before I ever won physically. Twice a day, 15 minutes in the morning, 15 at night, I rehearsed victory with such clarity, my body began to believe it had already happened. Oh, he trained his nervous system for a finish line he hadn't yet crossed. And when the day came, it simply followed the script his brain had already memorized. This is the difference between conceptual planning and neurological alignment. Ask yourself, are you only thinking about your goals? Or are you reprogramming yourself to live them? Because extraordinary achievement rarely comes from logic alone. It comes from conditioning, from embedding the outcome so deeply into your subconscious that your behaviors begin aligning without hesitation. And when your visualizations become structured, disciplined, and daily, something remarkable happens. Your brain begins filtering the world differently. What once seemed irrelevant becomes opportunity. What was once invisible becomes inevitable. Your subconscious begins scanning your environment for alignment, and almost magically, doors open. Not by luck, but by design. Because the mind that terrifies through its strength isn't only focused, it is programmed, and what it rehearses consistently, it will one day create. Most people rely almost entirely on conscious planning to pursue their goals, mapping steps, writing to-do lists, setting surface-level intentions, but this only activates a sliver of their true capacity. It's like trying to cross an ocean with a paddleboard when a jet engine is sitting idle within. Your subconscious mind, vast, alert, brilliant, beyond conscious awareness, is the real navigator. It sees patterns before your intellect catches up. It recognizes opportunities your logic cannot. And when you harness it through disciplined visualization, you tap into momentum that others mistake for magic. But for this to work, there's a requirement too often overlooked: emotion. Visualization without emotion is like a movie without sound. It's flat, it doesn't imprint, it doesn't change you. To unlock its power, you must inject every image with feeling: gratitude, anticipation, confidence, absolute certainty. Don't just see the outcome, feel the moment you achieve it. Feel the pride in your chest, the energy in your breath. Feel the weight lifting, the shift in your posture, the certainty in your decisions. Make your future real in every sense: visually, physically, emotionally, spiritually. And don't stop at the end goal. Visualize the version of you who made it possible. What habits did you maintain? What sacrifices did you embrace? What clarity did you protect when everyone else was distracted? This level of conditioning begins to reshape your identity. Soon, the actions required no longer feel foreign. They feel inevitable, because you're not chasing the outcome, you've already lived it 1,000 times in your mind. And your nervous system has begun to follow orders. So here is your challenge. Will you begin tomorrow morning with 20 minutes of structured visualization? Will you commit to making this a daily ritual, treating it not as a luxury, but as the mental calibration tool it truly is? Because the mind that terrifies through its strength is not merely skilled. It is already aligned with its future, so vividly, so consistently, that its arrival becomes a formality. And now we pivot into the realm where most minds retreat: discomfort. Throughout every era, across every field, those who evolve continually, those who outpace, outgrow, and outlast share one defining characteristic: they redefine their relationship with discomfort. They don't tolerate it, they seek it. Ask yourself, what separates those who continue ascending for decades from those who peak too early and plateau for the rest of their lives? It's not always intelligence. It's not always access. It's not even strategy. At the core, it's a philosophy. They use discomfort as fuel. They position themselves at the edge of their current capability again and again. They lean into friction. They walk toward the task that feels heavier, riskier, more uncertain, because they know that's where evolution happens. This approach may seem reckless to conventional thinkers. To the average achiever, it appears exhausting, even dangerous. But what it truly represents is a commitment to accelerated development, because growth doesn't live in safety. It lives at the border between what you know and what you're about to learn, the space where your skills are tested and your limits stretched. And those who return to that edge, day after day, don't just grow. They evolve into something no comfort seeker will ever become. When you observe someone who consistently and systematically moves toward challenger rather than away from it, you feel something different about them. There's a quiet intensity, a forward motion that never stalls. Their momentum feels inevitable. And to those who live by comfort, that kind of presence is unsettling, because it suggests a truth they've been avoiding. Growth doesn't come from what's easy. It comes from what stretches you. So how do you step into this kind of intentional evolution? You start with honesty. Conduct a full audit of your comfort zones. Look at the tasks, the habits, the routines that no longer require your full attention. Ask, where am I coasting? Where have I mastered just enough to stop growing? Then, and this is the part most will never do, you begin building a deliberate discomfort protocol. You regularly select challenges that sit just beyond your current edge, not impossibly out of reach, not mildly inconvenient, but calibrated discomfort enough to force adaptation without triggering collapse. That zone, the narrow space where pressure meets potential, is where real growth lives. Here's a rule you must adopt without negotiation. If you're not regularly stretched, you're not really growing. And those who apply this principle, they change fast. Margaret Donaldson is proof. She entered journalism with a debilitating speech impediment. Her first interviews were short, strained, filled with hesitation. Most in her position would have waited for confidence before accepting higher stakes assignments. Not Margaret. Every Monday, without fail, she submitted assignment requests above her current capability. She didn't wait to feel ready. She asked for what made her uncomfortable. Not marginally, but fully assignments that required skills she hadn't yet built, but believed she could. This wasn't recklessness. It was strategy. And over time, that consistent exposure rewired her nervous system. She didn't just learn to speak clearly. She became one of the most commanding voices in international journalism. Industry veterans couldn't explain it. But it wasn't luck. It was calibrated, growth compounded over time. So ask yourself now, are you still clinging to competence because it feels safe? Have you mistaken your performance plateau for achievement, instead of recognizing it as a warning sign that your evolution has stalled? What skills are waiting behind your current avoidance? What leadership, mastery, brilliance is buried beneath a habit of playing small? Because something profound happens when you flip your relationship with challenge. When discomfort becomes a signal to pursue rather than avoid, your rate of development skyrockets. You stop progressing incrementally. You start growing exponentially. And to others still anchored in safety, your rise won't make sense. It will look like luck, like talent, like magic. But you'll know the truth. It was pressure. It was choice. It was the daily decision to stretch. Because the mind that terrifies through its strength is not the one that waits for fear to fade, but the one that builds power by leaning into the edge. 9. Extreme responsibility, strategic discomfort, and the power of delayed conviction. Most people build their careers and lives around what they already know how to do. They shape their days around competence. They stay inside tasks that feel safe. And in doing so, they create invisible barriers around their own potential. But those who ascend continuously, those who become forces, not followers, operate differently. They don't wait for discomfort to find them. They seek it with precision. They choose challenges that stretch their identity, and they use tension as transformation. This isn't about punishing yourself or glorifying the grind. Strategic discomfort is not masochism. It is intelligent pressure designed to trigger growth that wouldn't occur in comfort. And the most evolved minds know this. When you study people who keep rising year after year, decade after decade, you'll find something striking beneath their success. They intentionally place themselves in roles, environments, and responsibilities that demand adaptation. They don't wait to be ready. They put themselves where readiness is the only option. So I challenge you now. Can you identify 3 areas of comfort currently limiting your development? Not failures, but plateau. Places where you've stopped climbing because things feel good enough. Once identified, can you create a protocol of discomfort? One that guides you directly into challenge and not recklessly, but deliberately, with the sole aim of expanding who you are. Because the mind that truly commands the room is the mind that walks into resistance willingly, while others shrink from it. And this brings us to the next principle. Extreme responsibility. There is a dividing line in every room, in every business, in every life. On one side, stand those who react to circumstance. On the other, those who reshape it. What separates the two? Is it skill? Luck? Resources? Number? It's something deeper. It is the decision to own the outcome, no matter what. Those who shift from excuse to ownership develop a presence that unsettles the average mind. Because while most people explain why they can't, these individuals are quietly engineering results. This form of responsibility is rare. And because it's rare, it's powerful. When you claim total ownership over your life, you become unblameable, unshakable, and ultimately undeniable. Why does this matter? Because your influence expands in direct proportion to how much responsibility you're willing to claim. Most people live inside a narrow circle bound by what they think they control. But every time you take ownership of something difficult, that circle expands. Your power grows. Not because the world gave it to you, but because you chose to carry what others refused to touch. So now ask yourself, where are you still outsourcing responsibility? Where are you waiting for conditions to change before you move? Because the ones who rise fastest are not the ones with perfect plans. They are the ones who say, if it's broken, I'll fix it. If it's slow, I'll speed it up. If it's unclear, I'll make it clear. This is the alchemy of transformation, where discomfort becomes training, where responsibility becomes leverage, and where consistent action becomes conviction, not just once, but again and again until the result is inevitable. Because the mind that terrifies through its strength doesn't wait for certainty. It walks into responsibility with such fire, the world has no choice but to follow. Those who habitually blame external forces for their setbacks unknowingly sentence themselves to a life of powerlessness. They become passengers in their own journey, tossed by conditions, ruled by circumstance. But those who claim total responsibility, even in the face of unfairness, unpredictability, and undeniable challenge, become the architects of change. They don't just react to the world, they shape it. And when others witness this, when someone watches a person stand tall in the storm and say, "This is mine to fix," even when the cause isn't clearly theirs, it creates presence that unsettles. Not through aggression, but through unstoppable resourcefulness. So how does one cultivate this kind of psychological strength? It begins with a simple but radical shift. Eliminate the word because. End one. Anytime you catch yourself explaining a failure, a delay, a shortfall, cut the sentence short before because arrives. This one habit disrupts the automatic need to justify and forces a new question. What now? What do I change? What do I create? What do I take ownership of immediately? Next, adopt the extreme responsibility framework. Here's the rule. Whenever something goes wrong, regardless of how valid the external cause may be, ask yourself, how did I create this? Through action, inaction, decision, or distraction? This bypasses the mental dead end of blame. It reroutes your energy toward one destination only, solution. This approach transformed Harrison Montgomery's legacy. He took over a struggling manufacturing company during one of the worst supply chain collapses in U.S. history, riddled with labor disputes, raw material shortages, and collapsing investor confidence. And yet, while rival CEOs met daily to document what made success impossible, Montgomery issued one internal directive: assume complete responsibility, always, no exceptions, no finger pointing, no circumstantial sympathy. Just one culture. Solve or step aside. What followed shocked the entire sector. His team, unbound by victim language, created systems, partnerships, and workflow efficiencies that others didn't even attempt to imagine. Why? Because they weren't looking for proof, they couldn't. They were looking for leverage they hadn't found yet. Ownership made them creative. Responsibility made them bold. And in the end, the company not only survived, it set record growth benchmarks during an industry-wide collapse. Now it's your turn to ask. Are you sabotaging your potential with sophisticated excuses? Have you confused being articulate with being effective? Are you still explaining the same problem when you could be engineering the solution? What if the insight you're waiting for is sitting just behind a wall of blame? What if your mind can't create the extraordinary until you remove the need to defend the ordinary? Because here's what happens when you adopt total ownership. Your creative engine awakens. You begin to see answers where others see limitations. You build possibilities from pressure. You unlock solutions that can't be accessed by minds still clinging to justification. And the most striking part? You become immune to conditions. Because you've chosen to become the condition. You're no longer shaped by the world, you shape it. Most people hide behind complexity when they fall short. But the few, the rare, they stare reality in the face and say, "It's mine. I will fix it." And that voice, that choice, that's the one the world cannot ignore. When you take full ownership, no exceptions, no excuses, something profound shifts inside you. That mindset eliminates the psychological escape hatch of blame. There's no one left to point to, no weather, no boss, no politics. And that clarity, while uncomfortable, unlocks a higher level of intelligence, solution orientation. But let's be clear, Extreme. Responsibility is not self-blame. It is not a tool for guilt, it is a weapon for effectiveness. Self-blame says, it's my fault, I'm flawed. Extreme responsibility says, this is mine, I'll lead the correction. One weakens you. The other turns you into an unstoppable force of creation. That shift from passive reactor to conscious creator is the very line that separates high performers from high potential underachievers. It's not talent. It's not timing. It's ownership. So here is your challenge. Can you go the next 7 days without a single excuse? Can you strip because from your vocabulary and replace it with, this is mine to lead, shape, and solve? What if every obstacle in front of you didn't arrive to punish you, but to reveal what you're ready to claim? Can you look at everything in your current life, your results, your habits, your standards, and say, with full sincerity, this is my creation. And if I created it, I can change it. Because the mind that terrifies through its strength is the one that makes no room for excuses, only for direction, correction, and evolution. And now we step into the second half of mastery, the discipline of delayed gratification. Every generation of greatness shares this invisible trait. They understand what most people never learn. The world doesn't reward urgency, rewards patience with precision. Ask yourself, what really separates those who accumulate wealth, wisdom, health, and influence over decades from those who plateau early and remain trapped in almost? Is it brain power, connections, even luck? All of these help, but none of them compare to this one core advantage, the ability to sacrifice immediate comfort for greater future gain. This is the hidden lever behind exponential growth. It's what separates the quick win chasers from the quiet builders. It's why those who delay the reward get more of it, because they've earned it through compound behavior. This kind of discipline confuses the present-minded. To them, saying no to pleasure looks like suffering. But to the future-driven, it's not suffering, it's strategy. And over time, it creates a curve of progress that's not linear, it's geometric. The slow climb becomes a steep rise. The trickle becomes a flood. When someone consistently chooses the difficult now for the powerful later, they radiate something rare, a self-mastery that others find almost unreachable. But it's not unreachable. It's practiced. It's chosen. It's trained. So, how do you begin? Start by examining your gratification reflexes. Where are you giving in too quickly? Where are you choosing the hit of pleasure over the depth of progress? Is it in your habits, your money, your conversations, your focus? Where are you spending today? At the cost of your tomorrow? Because the future isn't written in dreams. It's written in delayed decisions. And the mind that terrifies through its strength is not the one that acts the fastest. It is the one that waits with strategy, resists with conviction, and strikes with power. To develop the discipline of delayed gratification, you must create a system that interrupts the cycle of impulse. Every significant decision, especially those tied to money, time, or status, must pass through a deliberate pause, a mandatory window of reflection that scales with the weight of the choice. Before taking action, impose a structured waiting period. Within that time, conduct what few people ever do, a future impact scan. Ask, what will this decision yield in 1 year? What will it become in 5 years? What does it look like when stretched across a full decade? This isn't hypothetical delay. It's disciplined time compression, a habit of mentally living into outcomes before they occur. This approach was the foundation of Masato Yamamoto's rise. Starting with minimal capital and limited investor support, Yamamoto wasn't expected to impact Japan's competitive tech landscape. But within 15 years, she would become a national force in innovation. How? While her competitors invested early funds into image-building impressive offices, oversized teams, flashy campaigns, Yamamoto took a different path. We mandated a 5-year reinvestment window, she explained. No PR, no status symbols. Every dollar went back into deep research. What she practiced was what she called sequential satisfaction. We deferred every superficial win until the substance was undeniable. That patience, that refusal to rush validation, led to a series of breakthroughs the market had declared impossible. She didn't win by having more resources. She won by having a better relationship with time. So ask yourself now, where are you sacrificing a long-term empire for the comfort of a short-term applause? Where are you choosing psychological relief instead of strategic power? This isn't about denying all pleasure. It's about intelligent redirection strategic sacrifice for specific high-value futures. Because when your ability to delay gratification becomes exceptional, your outcomes begin to compound. You begin achieving what others can't, not because you're smarter, but because you're willing to wait. This is the great divide. Most people build their lives around immediate relief. They want it now. They chase the feeling. But those who are building something extraordinary, they plant deeper. They invest longer. And when the harvest arrives, it's exponential, not linear. This mindset is rare, but it is trainable. It creates results that the impatient can't understand. To them, it looks like magic, but it's just compound returns stacked behind deliberate sacrifice. Your future-oriented framework doesn't just produce results. It reshapes your character. It deepens your wisdom, builds financial endurance, and creates capability stacks that few can replicate. And what's most remarkable, eventually you begin to draw satisfaction not from reward, but from the process of progress itself. Those who sustain mastery for decades are not driven by consumption. They're driven by construction. They don't need to display success every month because they're building something that will echo for generations. So I ask you, can you learn to love the long game? Can you choose depth over display? Can you build with the quiet confidence of someone who knows the future is already theirs? Because they're planting now with discipline others cannot yet imagine? Because the mind that terrifies through its strength is not the one that collects quick wins. It is the one that compounds power through time. Now the question is yours to answer. Will you truly commit to identifying 3 key areas in your life where short-term indulgence is quietly suffocating your long-term potential? Will you build a deferred gratification system, one that reroutes every immediate impulse into long-term momentum? Because the mind that rises above the masses is not the one chasing quick wins. It's the one willing to sacrifice temporary comfort for permanent capability. It chooses meaningful movement over fleeting pleasure, progress over pleasure, vision over validation. And now, we move into the final keystone of inner power, the discipline of deliberate conviction. There is something striking that separates the few who rewrite industries, birth global movements, or shift the very trajectory of society from those who merely optimize the status quo. It isn't always intelligence. It isn't even opportunity. The defining factor is often their relationship with certainty. Where others doubt, revise, and retreat, these individuals hold a core belief so strong, so unshakable, it becomes gravitational. It attracts loyalty. It disarms resistance. It transforms mockery into silence. Because people don't follow logic. They follow certainty. And when that certainty is real, not ego-driven, not performative, but earned through comprehensive mental labor, it becomes an unstoppable force. So why does conviction generate such an extraordinary advantage? Because human psychology is wired to respond to leadership, not ambiguity. When someone stands tall amid chaos, undaunted by resistance, unfazed by ridicule, it causes a ripple. Suddenly, those who doubted begin questioning themselves, not you. They don't understand your data. They feel your presence. And that's what moves them. So how do you develop this kind of psychological steel? Start by making a critical distinction. Conviction is not opinion. Opinions are emotional, casual, often borrowed. But conviction? Conviction is built. It is forged through a process of deliberate intellectual confrontation. You don't just adopt a belief, you attack it. You try to break it. You gather every possible counterpoint, every rational argument that might unravel it. You don't protect it. You test it truthlessly. And only when it survives that fire does it become conviction. And only then should you speak it. This is the method Winston Harrington used when he transformed British industrial safety, despite facing total rejection from the manufacturing establishment. While his peers drafted slogans and PR plays, Harrington built a fortress of evidence. Before I proposed any regulation, he said, I wrote down every objection I could imagine. Then I answered each one until there were no more left. Oh, he didn't persuade through emotion. He led with precision. And in the end, the same executives who laughed at him would later credit him with saving lives, profits, and the nation's reputation. So ask yourself now, are you speaking from clarity or from noise? Have you confused a strong opinion with a grounded position? Are you mistaking preference for truth? What level of influence could you step into? If your ideas weren't built on passing feelings, but on unshakable understanding? Because once your certainty is earned, truly earned, you gain something most will never touch. The power to make others question their resistance, not your stance. And that cannot be argued with. It cannot be debated away. It is the kind of power that doesn't demand agreement. It compels alignment. Because the mind that terrifies through its strength is not just confident, it is immovable. 10. Ruthless execution, perpetual learning, emotional mastery, strategic thinking, radical accountability, definite purpose, decision velocity, and strategic optimism. There's a silent posture most people carry on of hesitation, not action. They hold positions, but they do not stand in them. They speak ideas, but with the fragile undertone of psychological uncertainty. It leaks through their voice, through their eyes, through their choices. But when true conviction enters the room, real, earned, tested conviction, it commands attention without saying a word. It is a psychological weight so dense it bends the room toward it. No title, no credentials, just presence. And presence, earned through clarity, always wins. But let's be precise. Conviction is not stubbornness. It is not the refusal to change. It is not rigidity dressed as strength. True conviction is built from such thorough understanding, such layered mental testing, that no challenge can uproot it because every objection has already been examined and transcended. When you study the rare few who don't just contribute to a field but reshape it, you'll find they didn't arrive at conviction by chance. They arrived through fire. They submitted their own beliefs to the blade of opposing thought. They tried to break what they wanted to believe until what remained was indestructible. So the challenge for you is this. Will you stop holding opinions and start forging convictions? Can you take one belief home that matters deeply and pressure test it until it's no longer just preferred, but unshakable? Because the mind that terrifies through its strength isn't loud. It isn't defensive. It stands like stone because it is made of understanding. Now, from that foundation of certainty, we move to what builds empires, ruthless execution. This is where dreamers disappear and builders rise. This is where ideas leave whiteboards and become revolutions. Because no matter how visionary your mind is, no matter how brilliant your insight, execution is the only language the world responds to. Think of the greatest innovations, the products, systems, movements that reshaped reality. Yes, they started with imagination, but they were forged in relentless implementation. Those who change the world are not those with the best ideas. They are the ones who act without waiting, who move with discipline, who take the step before they feel fully ready because they understand something essential. The world does not reward potential. It rewards what is finished. Why does this level of follow-through create such disproportionate advantage? Because most people are addicted to preparation. They loop in refinement. They wait for alignment, feedback, support, applause. But execution-centered minds move while others think. And that movement flawed, fast, and focused outruns perfection every time. So now I ask, can you stop mistaking idea generation for impact? Can you shift from intention to invasion? From vision to velocity? Because the marketplace isn't a museum for concepts. It is a battlefield for implementation. And those who execute with consistency, speed, and precision, regardless of setbacks, own the space. This is the difference. This is why brilliant thinkers with unrealized dreams get left behind by those who simply move. Because the mind that terrifies through its strength is not only deeply certain, it is relentless in its ability to act. Those who execute consistently, relentlessly, even imperfectly perform those who dream in silence by exponential margins. While the perfectionist refines, edits, and reimagines, the executor delivers. And even flawed action, compounded through repetition and refinement, creates results that theory never will. Ideas without implementation are hallucinations. Elegant thoughts, beautifully structured, are worth nothing until they take shape in the real world. But when you observe a person who consistently turns concepts into systems, visions into operations, regardless of resistance, limitations, or complexity, it creates a presence few can match. It's not loud, it's not chaotic, it's focused, methodical, and deeply intimidating. Because relentless productivity doesn't just impress, it overwhelms. So how do you train yourself to live in this level of implementation? It begins with a ruthless question. What is the measurable outcome this action will produce? Not what it will signal, not how good it will sound, but what specific trackable result will this actually generate? Filter every task through that lens. Then build what most people avoid, a real accountability architecture. Turn broad intentions into concrete deliverables. Tie actions to deadlines, metrics, and binary outcomes, done or not done. No fluff, no vagueness, only movement tracked by milestones. And perhaps most important of all, develop an intolerance for almost. Raise your personal standards so high that partial completion becomes unacceptable. Eliminate the phrase "in progress" from your identity. Deliver, finalize, ship. This is what Isabella Rothschild did when she revolutionized European healthcare systems. Without a medical degree, without political leverage, just with velocity and execution as her religion. While others sat in rooms arguing theoretical best practices, she installed working solutions. Within 72 hours of concept. They weren't perfect. They weren't fully approved. But they worked, and iteration made them better. Speed, followed by refinement. She outperformed strategy that never left the drawing board. She didn't wait for permission. She made results the justification. Her execution-first philosophy created breakthroughs that legacy institutions had been planning for decades without producing. So ask yourself, are you mistaking mental clarity for actual creation? Are you caught in a cycle of idea worship while your projects collect dust? Because when your execution muscle becomes elite, you will start producing in months what others take years to even begin. You will leapfrog complexity through momentum. You will convert hesitation into forward pressure. And most importantly, you will become the rare person whose ideas actually exist outside your mind. To the planners, it will seem supernatural. To you, it will simply be the new normal. Understand this. Most people spend the majority of their time thinking, planning, organizing, and preparing, while endlessly postponing the only thing that matters, implementation. And they don't call it procrastination. They call it prudence. They justify it with responsibility, research, alignment. But deep down, it's fear. Fear disguised as logic. Perfectionism disguised as professionalism. And it is costing them their empire. Because the mind that terrifies through its strength isn't the one with the most ideas, it's the one that moves with speed, executes with precision, and finishes what others fear to start. Your commitment to ruthless execution is what takes you from potential to power. It's what separates those who live in their heads from those who leave impact in their wake. Because actionat intentionis, the great transformer. Ideas remain fantasies until they are forged through execution. And when you operate with that level of clarity, when every move is tied to outcome, and every action is built for force, you become a presence that others can no longer ignore. But understand this clearly. Execution is not frenzy. It is not chaos dressed as productivity. It is precision, strategy, discipline. True executors don't chase every task. They focus on the high leverage moves, the few actions that unlock disproportionate results. They don't just work, they advance. When you study the rare few who've redefined industries, not just contributed to them, you'll notice a common pattern. They merge bold vision with mechanical consistency. They don't just dream, they deliver daily. And to them, unrealized potential is a form of moral failure, because brilliance that never moves is indistinguishable from mediocrity. So here's your challenge. Take one idea, one that's been sitting in contemplation for far too long, and bring it into real-world execution within the next 30 days. Build the system, launch the prototype, make the call, write the policy. Move, because your power will not be found in what you know. It will be found in what you prove. And when execution becomes your identity, not your effort, you stop asking, will I get it done? You already know the answer. Because the mind that terrifies through its strength is the mind that finishes relentlessly, without permission, without apology. Now we turn to the force that keeps that mind evolving, the discipline of perpetual learning. There's something extraordinary about individuals who keep growing, not for 5 years, but for 5 decades. Not until success, but beyond it. What makes them different? It's not just intelligence. It's not access or degrees. It's their relationship with knowledge, and more specifically, their refusal to let learning become optional. While others slow down once they reach proficiency, these rare few accelerate. They study harder when they win. They read deeper when they rise. They seek feedback even when they lead, because they understand that knowledge is not additive, it is exponential. Every new insight connects to previous foundations, unlocking strategies and efficiencies that were impossible to see from their last level of thinking. This is why those who read, study, reflect, and refine daily experience growth that seems incomprehensible to those around them. While others plateau, they evolve. While others rely on what they once knew, they're acquiring what others haven't even discovered yet. Why does this matter? Because in a world that's shifting by the week, yesterday's knowledge becomes today's irrelevance, and those who cling to what once worked will quietly drift into obsolescence. Not because they weren't good enough, but because they stopped learning. So ask yourself now, is your learning system as relentless as your ambition? Are you growing as fast as the challenges you're about to face? Because the mind that terrifies through its strength is not just the mind that executes, but the mind that never stops sharpening its edge. When someone witnesses an individual already respected, already proven still pursuing knowledge with ferocity, not slowing down but accelerating, they begin to sense something rare. It's not just intelligence, it's developmental velocity, and it's intimidating. Because most people, once they've reached recognition, once their title is secure, gradually withdraw from growth. They stop studying with hunger. They begin repeating rather than evolving. They mistake mastery for maintenance. But the few, the rare few who keep climbing, they don't study because they lack. They study because they lead. So how do you implement this kind of relentless learning engine? You begin with a system, not just a habit. Set aside a minimum of 2 sacred hours per day for targeted learning. Not passive reading, not occasional browsing, but deliberate, focused study treated as non-negotiable, regardless of your workload or calendar pressure. Then, expand your range. Don't just deepen your current field, diversify it. Study adjacent domains. Explore contrary ideas. Let your expertise cross-pollinate with fresh disciplines. Because true insight doesn't emerge from echo chambers. It's forged where different worlds collide, where engineering meets psychology, where business touches biology, where art redefines data. Most importantly, develop what few possess, a relentless sensitivity to obsolescence. Conduct regular audits of your mental models, not to update, but to eliminate what no longer serves. Replace outdated assumptions. Challenge sacred principles. Don't modify the old, replace it with the superior. This mindset transformed the life of Richard Pendleton. He began in obscurity working as a factory floor technician, dismissed by competitors who flaunted degrees and credentials. But within a decade, he had revolutionized American industrial engineering. His secret? I never left the apprenticeship mindset, he said. While the so-called experts grew comfortable, Pendleton committed 5 hours every day to study, half in his core specialty, the rest exploring seemingly unrelated fields: philosophy, systems theory, ergonomics, and history. That curiosity, structured and relentless, produced innovations that defied industry expectations. His breakthroughs weren't luck. They were the byproduct of compound learning fueled by consistent action. What others thought impossible, he approached with frameworks they'd never seen because they never bothered to look. So now ask yourself, are you mistaking your current competence for permanent capability? Have you confused your credentials with true readiness for the future? What new abilities, innovations, or transformations could emerge if you treated every day like the beginning, not the victory lap? Because when your hunger to learn remains undiminished by status, you create something profound, a capability curve that never flattens. While your peers slow down comfortable with knowing enough, you keep rising. You keep absorbing, iterating, refining, and soon what feels overwhelming to others becomes normal to you. Not because you're lucky, but because you've built a mental infrastructure that expands when others rest. Understand this. Most professionals coast after competence. They no longer push boundaries. They no longer seek depth. They unknowingly install a ceiling and call it realism, end quote. But you, if you choose to build a life where knowledge never stops flowing, your ceiling disappears, and your results begin to look mythical, because the mind that terrifies through its strength is the one that keeps growing, long after the applause has started. Your discipline of perpetual learning doesn't just make you informed, it builds a compounding advantage, an intellectual flywheel that multiplies your capability far beyond linear expectations. Each new insight links with another. Each framework, each refined principle, each synthesized idea creates exponential leaps, not incremental steps. But understand this. Effective learning isn't passive. It's not about consuming endless content or collecting knowledge like trophies. It's about strategic acquisition, targeted, applied, intentional. It's learning in service of a mission. It's mastering exactly what the next level demands and refusing to indulge in knowledge that doesn't serve execution. When you study the few who grow steadily over decades, not months, not career phases, but entire eras, you find a single pattern. They pair deep expertise with unbroken learning intensity. They're never satisfied. They don't confuse accolades with arrival. They don't treat mastery as a finish line. They treat it as momentum. And here's what they all understand. The moment you feel content with your knowledge is the moment you begin to decay. Because knowledge satisfaction is professional complacency dressed in confidence. And no matter how capable you are today, if your learning velocity drops, your decline begins. So ask yourself right now, can you establish a daily, non-negotiable learning protocol that matches the hunger of your earliest growth phase? Can you carry the apprenticeship mindset through every level of recognition? Because the mind that terrifies through its strength is the mind that never stops learning. It grows while others rest. It evolves while others plateau. And eventually it becomes the mind that others look to, not because it knows everything, but because it never stops discovering. And now we turn to one of the most powerful levers of greatness, emotional self-mastery. Across every century of achievement, every field of dominance, there's one trait that shows up again and again, one internal edge that distinguishes consistent giants from inconsistent brilliance. It is their relationship with emotional states. While others perform well when things go well, those who lead history perform well regardless. They excel in storms. They move forward under pressure. They execute under rejection, chaos, fatigue, confusion, and loss. Why? Because they've learned to lead themselves first. They are not driven by emotional spikes. They don't need ideal conditions. They operate with internal stability. So what truly separates the revolutionary from the reactive? Not just higher IQ, not better tools, not even more preparation, but something deeper: emotional sovereignty. The capacity to regulate mood, focus, confidence, and composure, regardless of external triggers or internal storms. This inner strength doesn't show up in moments of ease. It shows up when circumstances betray you, when pressure peaks, and when every instinct wants to pull you off course, but you remain unshaken. Why does this level of emotional command matter? Because your effectiveness is state dependent. No matter how smart you are, if you can't control your state, you can't access your full capabilities. The reactive mind burns brilliance in emotional volatility, but the trained mind, the sovereign mind, it stays open, sharp, and capable under any pressure. It moves while others spiral. It decides while others hesitate. It leads while others unravel, because the mind that terrifies through its strength is not the one that reacts. It is the one that remains. When someone witnesses a person who remains calm, still, and composed in the middle of chaos, when the room erupts, when tension spikes, when others spiral, that person becomes unforgettable. Their stillness feels almost unnatural. Their emotional control unshakable. And to those watching, it's both intimidating and magnetic. This isn't luck. It's not temperament. It's training. So how does one build this level of emotional command? You begin by mapping the terrain. Start a trigger tracking protocol. Document the exact moments, people, phrases, or environments that consistently knock you off center. Identify the patterns. Define the stimuli. Name the emotional responses that no longer serve your mission. Once mapped, prepare in advance. Develop what few people even know exists: a pre-trigger strategy. Mentally rehearse optimal responses before stepping into charged environments. Visualize yourself staying composed, responding, not reacting. Create pre-installed behavioral sequences, so when provoked, you don't rely on willpower, you execute a script. But the most critical component: intercept emotion at the body level, because emotion hits your physiology before it hits your mind. Your breath tightens, your muscles contract, your posture shifts, your nervous system surge. So train yourself to respond at the first physical signal. Use breath work. Adjust muscle tone. Interrupt the neurological chain before it climbs into narrative. Master this early intervention, and you no longer manage emotion, you lead it. Victoria Wellington became the embodiment of this discipline. While diplomats around her cracked under pressure, lost control in negotiations, and allowed geopolitical chaos to hijack their state, Wellington stood like a lighthouse in a storm. Her secret? I chose my emotional state every time, she said. No matter the hostility in the room, she activated deliberate breathing, neutralized her physiology, and reframed the meaning of every interaction. She didn't react, she reprogrammed. And in doing so, she facilitated peace where war seemed inevitable. Now reflect on yourself. Are you still allowing the world to determine how you feel? Do you justify your reactivity by calling it authenticity? What would happen if you reclaimed your emotional state as your sole responsibility? Because here's the truth. When your emotional mastery becomes elite, you gain access to performance others can't even reach. While they're drowning in adrenaline and panic, you're thinking clearly. While they spiral, till you make decision. While they lash out, you lead. This is not emotional suppression. It is emotional sovereignty. And when you operate from that place, you unlock a kind of presence that doesn't just command respect. It creates silence. Most people unconsciously give up control of their emotional world. They let others press buttons. They let moods govern moves. And they spend their lives fluctuating, brilliant one moment, broken the next. But you, when you master this discipline, your performance stabilizes. Your presence sharpens. Your capacity expands under pressure, not despite it. Because the mind that terrifies through its strength is not ruled by emotion. It rules through it. When you develop full emotional sovereignty, you unlock consistent access to your highest cognitive faculties, regardless of pressure, chaos, or external volatility. That is not just an advantage. In today's world, it's a weapon, because while others lose clarity in crisis, you remain in full command. And in that state, you do not just survive the storm, you lead through it. But understand this clearly. Emotional mastery is not about suppression. It's not avoidance. It is strategic regulation, purposefully aligned with optimal functioning. It's the difference between white-knuckling your way through pressure versus channeling energy into decision, clarity, and precision. When you examine the few who maintain peak performance across rapidly shifting environments, economic, political, interpersonal, you'll discover a core pattern. They are not numb. They are aware and disciplined. They allow themselves to feel fully, but never to be ruled by what they feel, because they understand. Psychological sovereignty is not a luxury. It is the prerequisite for sustained greatness. So here's your call to action. Can you commit right now to mastering 3 specific emotional triggers that currently rob you of clarity? Name them, define them, then design intervention protocols: physiological, behavioral, cognitive. Train yourself to intercept the emotion before it surges, not by force, but by design. Because the mind that terrifies through its strength doesn't wait to feel calm, it creates calm. It chooses its emotional state and builds its actions from that chosen ground. Now we cross into the next pillar of power, the architecture of strategic thinking. In every field war, science, business, diplomacy, there's a dividing line between those who repeat known patterns and those who unlock entirely new arenas of possibility. What makes the difference? Not just intellect, not even access to data. It's their relationship with strategic cognition. They don't just analyze the problem. They restructure how the problem is seen. They don't just extrapolate forward. They zoom out, invert, reframe, and reconnect seemingly unrelated dots. And in doing so, they create solutions that leave conventional minds confused, because conventional minds are still asking, what's the best answer? While strategic minds are asking, are we even asking the right question? Why does this kind of strategic thinking produce such extraordinary leverage? Because most cognition is linear and associative. It pulls from what's familiar, adds incremental logic, and stays confined within existing mental models. But strategic thinkers don't build inside the current box. They redesign the box itself. Their thinking is layered, multidimensional, expansive. They challenge assumptions, pressure test perspectives, and scan the landscape from the perspective of both now and next. This is not guesswork, it's architecture. And those who master it don't just find better answers, they uncover entirely new paths. So ask yourself, are you still thinking inside inherited structures? Are you solving based on proximity? Or from principle, pattern, and deep perspective? Because the mind that terrifies through its strength is not the one that memorizes the map. It's the one that redraws the territory. Those who rise above their field rarely solve problems faster. They solve them differently. Their advantage isn't intelligence alone. It's their capacity to approach the same challenge from multiple vantage points, to step out of linear lanes and into layered cognitive architecture. They see patterns others miss. They reframe constraints as creative leverage. They recombine ideas across domains, and through that multidimensional thinking, they uncover solutions that feel almost supernatural to those around them. When someone observes a person consistently reframing impossible problems into elegant, efficient outcomes, they don't just respect them, they fear them. Because that kind of problem-solving velocity doesn't look learned. It looks like genius, but it's not magic. It's a methodology. So how do you develop this strategic thinking power? First, implement what most never even consider: a systematic perspective-shifting protocol. For every major decision or challenge, refuse to default to your habitual lens. Instead, analyze it through a minimum of 5 conceptual frameworks. What does this look like through the lens of game theory? systems thinking, first principle logic, behavioral economics, inversion. You don't wait for brilliance. You generate it by rotating the lens. Next, attack your own assumptions. Identify the core premises behind your current thinking. Then ask, what if this wasn't true? Search for counter evidence. Deliberately disassemble what you've been trained to believe. Because most problems aren't unsolvable, they're misframed. But the most critical element is this: scenario projection discipline. Train yourself to simulate ripple effects. When making a decision, don't stop at the first order consequence. Mentally model the second, third, and fourth outcomes. Think beyond the initial reaction. Ask, if I do this, what chain reaction am I triggering? How will this look 90 days from now? A year? 5 years? Linear minds stop at outcome. Strategic minds see aftershock. This approach transformed Hidetoshi Nakamura from an overlooked engineer into the mind that restructured Japanese industrial manufacturing. Facing constraints deemed unsolvable by industry experts, Nakamura refused to use the same cognitive tools that built the problem. While his competitors worked harder within the traditional frame, he changed the frame entirely. We implemented 7-lens analysis, he said. Every problem was rotated through at least 7 conceptual models, not for novelty, but to dismantle false limits and expose hidden entry points. Through this process, what was once categorized as blocked became a design advantage. And the results? Breakthroughs that veterans called logically impossible. So now it's your turn to confront the real question. Are you thinking freely? Or just cleverly within the cage? Are you still applying old models to new challenges? Have you confused experience with superiority, when what's required is cognitive reinvention? Because when your strategic thinking becomes exceptional, you begin seeing opportunities that others can't even name. You don't just analyze, you architect. You don't react, you reshape. And what you create looks so precise, so immediate, that others will call it talent. But you'll know it was perspective, structure, and discipline. This is the new rule of effectiveness. Those who think in layers outperform those who think in lines. Because the mind that terrifies through its strength is not the one that solves fast, but the one that solves deeper, wider, and in ways that leave limitation behind. When you study the few who don't just innovate within industries, but redefine them completely, you'll find something striking beneath the surface. It's not just IQ, not just access, not even boldness. It's a fusion of analytical rigor and cognitive flexibility. These individuals do not just analyze, they re-perceive. They break out of the mental cages others mistake for structure. They treat every paradigm not as gospel but as hypothesis. And when a mental model becomes outdated, they don't defend it. They replace it because they understand the most dangerous limitation in any high performer's life is not lack of skill, but loyalty to a lens that no longer works. So ask yourself now, will you take one challenge, the one that's stuck, stalled, or looping, and analyze it through 5 distinct conceptual frameworks before moving forward? Will you build perspective shifting as a core function of your cognitive system, not as a last resort, but as your first weapon? Because the mind that terrifies through its strength does not think harder. It thinks wider and deeper and differently. And in doing so, it transforms limits into leverage. Now we move to a domain most fear: radical accountability. This is not about blame. This is not even about conventional responsibility. This is the raw, untamed edge of ownership, the territory where average performers collapse and legends are born. What separates those who convert limitation into innovation from those who chronically explain failure? It's not better strategy. It's not better support. It's not even better execution. It's their refusal to outsource responsibility. They don't ask, whose fault is this? They ask, where is my leverage point regardless of who created the issue? They don't wait for fairness. They create impact anyway. This unfiltered commitment to personal ownership creates a presence that others find deeply unsettling, because it reveals how much of their own life has been surrendered to excuse. Why is this mindset so rare and so powerful? Because your sphere of influence expands, only as fast as your willingness to take responsibility expands. Take ownership only where expected, and your power remains locked inside the structure of circumstance. But own beyond your title, your scope, your obligation, and suddenly you're not reacting to life. You are shaping it. When people see someone taking responsibility for results far beyond their formal role, they don't just admire them, they're disarmed. It's the kind of resourcefulness that erases hierarchy. It's the kind of drive that no one can argue with, because it doesn't complain. It creates. So how do you install this mindset? Step 1. Eliminate excuses systematically. Each time a result falls short, train your mind to reject external attribution, no matter how valid the external cause may be. Force the first question to be, how did I allow, create, or tolerate this? That question alone shifts your power back inward. Step 2. Build an ownership expansion protocol. Look beyond your job description, beyond your comfort, beyond what is fair, and start taking command in areas others ignore. When you see a gap, close it. When you see an inefficiency, solve it. When you hear that's not your job, let that be your signal to lead. Because the mind that terrifies through its strength does not wait for permission to own the outcome. It declares it and delivers it relentlessly. When radical accountability becomes your core operating system, something profound happens. You stop explaining and start creating. You no longer analyze the problem in circles. You don't waste energy in loops of justification. You don't ask, why did this happen? You go straight to, how do I fix it now? This is the reflex of leaders who operate at uncommon altitude. Their mind no longer tolerates dwelling in blame, confusion, or moral correctness. They skip the intermediate step entirely. Problem? Good. Now solve. No drama, no delay, no detour through why. Oh, ask yourself honestly, are you still confining your sense of accountability within the borders of your formal role? Do you still mistake a good reason for the best response? Because here's the truth. Most people remain stuck not because they can't, but because they justify their limits. They believe explanation is contribution. They think a valid excuse is an intelligent perspective. It's not. It's a cage. And what happens when you smash through that mental wall? You unlock a level of effectiveness that seems unfair to those still playing by the rules of limitation. When your accountability orientation becomes truly radical, when it no longer checks with hierarchy, expectation, or formality, you begin finding solutions others can't even see. Why? Because radical ownership shuts the door on the mind's favorite escape hatch, justified limitation. You remove the space for, it's not my job. You erase, I did everything I could. You destroy, they should have helped. And in that vacuum, creativity takes over. Innovation ignites. You begin operating from necessity, and necessity is the mother of revolution. Let me be crystal clear. Radical accountability is not self-blame. It's not martyrdom. It's strategic power. It's the mental stance that says, I own this because when I own it, I control it. And the more I own, the more I shape. Not just react to, not just observe, but transform. Now study those rare few who rebuild teams, industries, companies, even entire cultures. You'll find something consistent. They take responsibility beyond reason. They step in when they're not required. They solve what no one asked them to solve. They lead where no one gave them permission to lead. And the impact? It's undeniable. Not because of position, not because of resources, but because they made ownership the source of their authority. So I challenge you now. Can you go 14 days without a single excuse? Not one. Can you identify 3 specific areas in your life, professional, relational, personal, where expanded accountability would create disproportionate impact, even if it's outside your formal responsibility? Because the mind that terrifies through its strength does not wait for permission to lead. It reclaims every situation as its own. That mind doesn't hope for impact. It enforces it. That mind doesn't avoid blame. It eliminates blame by owning the outcome entirely. That mind doesn't ask, who caused this? It asks, where's my leverage point? And how fast can I activate it? Because radical accountability is not just a mindset, it's a method for becoming unstoppable. When a person takes ownership beyond all reasonable expectation, when they assume responsibility for results others wouldn't dare touch, something rare emerges. They begin producing outcomes that seem impossible to the average mind. Where others see walls, they see windows. Where excuse makers retreat, they advance. And behind these world shapers, there's a deeper truth, a defining separator between those who transform entire domains and those who produce work that is good, how but forgettable. It isn't just talent. It isn't just access or timing. It's not charisma or luck. It is definite purpose. Not vague ambition, not wants loosely held, but an unshakable clarity of mission. This purpose precision becomes a force multiplier. It creates focus so sharp it intimidates, and it generates achievement velocity that scattered minds simply cannot comprehend. Why? Because the mind, like energy, obeys the law of conservation and concentration. Scatter your attention across 10 priorities, and you make progress on none. Channel that same mental, emotional, spiritual force into a single outcome, and you create momentum that appears exponential. Definite purpose isn't motivational fluff. It's a neurocognitive targeting system. When your full psychic bandwidth is aimed at one precise destination, your decisions align, your time streamlines, your willpower compounds. When people encounter someone whose entire life seems organized around one burning mission, they feel it. It's a presence that radiates clarity, and that presence is quietly, undeniably intimidating. So how do you develop this? How do you move from vague aspiration to purposeful fire? You start with what most never do, a désir inventory. List every significant want, hope, ambition, fantasy currently taking up mental bandwidth. No filtering, just extraction. Then begin the ruthless distillation. One by one, pit those desires against each other in a mental elimination tournament, and filter them through a single criterion, which one, if achieved, would render all others either unnecessary or automatically fulfilled. Keep going, sharpen it down, strip away the noise, until you land on one, the one behind all the others. And most critically, once it's found, define it with precision. Make it measurable, visible, and complete with clear finish lines. A vague dream cannot drive a clear strategy, but a purpose with unmistakable outcome criteria becomes a magnet for execution. This is exactly how Thomas Wellington rewired international economic development. He started with virtually no backing, no infrastructure, no institutional credibility. But he had what his contemporaries lacked, a singular purpose. While others scattered themselves across multiple noble objectives, Wellington applied the principle of absolute concentration. I identified the one breakthrough, he said, that would make everything else either irrelevant or automatic. He structured his life around that one point of transformation. And that focus didn't just increase his effectiveness, it multiplied his power. So ask yourself now, are you still operating from general ambition? Or have you crystallized purpose into mission? Do you wake up each day pulled in 10 directions, or laser focused on one that matters most? Because the mind that terrifies through its strength is not the one filled with desire, but the one organized around a single, non-negotiable aim. That mind doesn't try everything. It accomplishes the one thing that changes everything. Thomas Wellington once said that his power didn't come from greater resources, but from greater focus. When asked how he achieved results that global economists deemed mathematically impossible, his answer was clear. I didn't need more. I needed one. One purpose, one outcome, one relentless direction. He explained that once that purpose was crystallized, resources previously unseen began to organize around it. Time, talent, opportunity, capital, they aligned. Because clarity doesn't just simplify, it multiplies. And yet most people live with scattered focus. They chase multiple aspirations, all admirable, none dominant. They stay busy, but never break through. They confuse motion with movement. So ask yourself now, are you spreading your energy across several worthy but competing goals? Are you mistaking admirable effort for concentrated force? Because the difference is life-altering. When your purpose clarity becomes exceptional, something radical happens. You start accomplishing singular objectives at a velocity that others can't explain, not because you're more talented, but because you're more concentrated. You've stopped leaking attention. You've stopped splitting willpower, and that focus creates acceleration. You go farther with less. You build faster with fewer parts, and your growth appears supernatural to those still trying to balance it all. This is how you activate true leverage, not through more effort, but through more precision. Purpose is not about passion. It's about ruthless specificity. It's about defining the finish line so clearly that your mind no longer negotiates. When you study the rare minds who've reshaped industries, fields, movements, you'll see the same pattern. They may know many things, but they build one. Their awareness is broad, but their execution is narrow like a blade, because they know what most don't. Purpose diffusion is the great killer of greatness, and it's not always obvious. It hides in noble distractions. It masquerades as ambition, but it erodes your progress one scattered day at a time. So I ask you, will you commit to the process of purpose distillation? Will you extract every goal from your system, then isolate the one that renders all others unnecessary or automatic? And once it's found, will you name it? Will you define it with absolute clarity, with metrics, deadlines, completion criteria so undeniable that your subconscious can no longer pretend it's vague? Because the mind that terrifies through its strength does not chase many, it finishes one. And that one rewrites everything. Now, from purpose, we enter its fiercest companion, the science of decision. Across every era of breakthrough, military, scientific, economic, creative, you'll find one dividing line that separates the builders from the stuck, their relationship with decisiveness. Because in the end, no amount of potential, clarity, or planning matters. If action remains on pause, the most brilliant minds in history didn't always have the best answers, but they always made the boldest decisions. When you study those who generate extraordinary impact, not just talk, not just potential, but real, lasting transformation, you'll find one pattern woven through all of them. They decide fast, and they decide well. While others hesitate, they move. While others analyze endlessly, they initiate execution. It's not that they never make mistakes. They just refuse to let indecision steal momentum. So what truly separates revolutionary leaders from the equally brilliant minds whose potential stays locked in theory? Not just intellect, not resources, not timing. It's their relationship with decision. More specifically, their capacity for rapid, high-quality decision-making without waiting for perfect conditions. This is what creates implementation velocity. And to the perfectionist, this speed is alarming. It looks reckless. It feels too fast. But in reality, it is refined instinct, trained intuition, and clear protocols converging into forward motion. Why is this speed so critical? Because in every domain that matters, business, innovation, leadership, competition, advantage flows to the fast. Not to the smartest, not to the most cautious, but to those who act, adjust, and advance while others are still preparing. Think about it. The individual who makes 10 good decisions and refines quickly will always outperform the one who waits too long to make a perfect one. So when people see someone who transitions from insight to action with supernatural precision and pace, they don't feel inspired. They feel intimidated, because this isn't just decisiveness. It's presence born from speed. So how do you build this kind of decision power? It starts with structure. Implement a system of decision classification. Most people judge decisions by perceived importance. You must learn to judge by reversibility. Ask, can this decision be undone or adjusted with minimal cost? If yes, decide fast. Move forward, test, iterate. Deliberation becomes a liability here. If the decision is irreversible, like hiring a key executive, changing business models, or public commitments, then apply proportionate thought. Not perfectionism, just proportion. This one habit alone can change your trajectory, because most people treat every decision like a high stakes gamble. And in doing so, they burn energy where speed is required and freeze where courage is required. But the high impact mind, it moves by design. It chooses without flinching, and it executes before others finish their sentence. So ask yourself, are you letting overanalysis strangle your ambition? Are you confusing carefulness with clarity? Because the mind that terrifies through its strength is not the one that waits for perfect timing. It creates perfect timing through fast, clear, and consistent decision velocity. The final layer of decision mastery is not just speed, but structure. High performers don't just act fast. They define in advance how much information is enough. They don't fall into the trap of endless research. They predetermine threshold-specific measurable limits for what qualifies as sufficient clarity before a decision must be made. Because here's the truth. Most people are not making better decisions. They're just avoiding them under the mask of more research. This avoidance feels responsible, but it's just another form of fear. When asked how she drove implementation velocity through one of the most volatile periods in tech history, Madeline Blackwell revealed her decisional acceleration model, while competitors sat stalled, waiting for full clarity. Blackwell moved. We used a two-tiered decision architecture, she explained. For reversible choices, the team acted on minimum viable data. Deliberation was considered waste. For irreversible decisions, they had a pre-established deliberation window matched to the impact of the choice and either exceeded. This structure created velocity so fast that competitors in perfection organizations simply couldn't keep up. They were still planning when she was already launching, testing, refining, and scaling. And the result? Technological breakthroughs that industry insiders claimed were impossible within the time frames she achieved. Not because she had more talent, but because she eliminated the biggest barrier to execution, décision drague. So ask yourself now, are you still confusing thinking with progress? Have you made perfect decisions your false benchmark, while opportunity races ahead? Because when your decision-making becomes extraordinarily efficient, you begin to bend time. You move faster. You launch faster. You recover faster. And your implementation velocity becomes your unfair advantage. To those trapped in deliberation, your momentum will seem almost unnatural, but you'll know the truth. You simply removed the friction they refused to let go, because most individuals unconsciously extend analysis long after the required clarity has been met. They fear regret more than they pursue progress, and in that hesitation they forfeit impact. But the mind that terrifies through its strength does not overthink. It moves, it builds, and it arrives before others even begin. 11th, the science of decision velocity and strategic optimism. There is a secret rhythm behind every great achievement, not just what is chosen, but how fast it's acted upon. In a world paralyzed by overthinking, your ability to make rapid, high-quality decisions becomes a competitive weapon. It closes the gap between insight and impact. It turns potential into results. Because in almost every domain, from invention to leadership, from markets to missions, speed of execution matters more than incremental gains in precision. Your decision discipline becomes the bridge between conceptual brilliance and tangible power. It compresses weeks into hours and hesitation into movement. But let's be clear. Effective decision-making is not recklessness. It is strategic classification built on reversibility, not just perceived importance. This is the lever most minds never pull. You must rewire your decision process. If a choice can be reversed cheaply and quickly, decide immediately. Move forward, test and learn. If a decision carries long-term impact or irreversibility, allocate deliberation that matches the consequence and nothing more. Study those rare individuals who don't just imagine industries, but reshape them. What you'll discover is consistent. They combine rigorous thinking with relentless decisiveness. They don't linger in loops. They don't wait for all the data. They predetermine what's enough to act, and they act. Because they understand, perpetual deliberation is slow death in disguise. So now the challenge is yours. Will you commit to installing a decision framework based on reversibility instead of emotion? Can you define exactly what level of data suffices for each category of choice so no energy is wasted in doubt? Because the mind that terrifies through its strength does not analyze endlessly, it initiates, it executes, it accelerates. And where others get stuck, this mind leaves tracks. Now, from velocity, we pivot to the fire that sustains momentum. Strategic optimism. There's something deeper than positivity, more muscular than hope. It's the mindset that creates futures, not waits for them. What separates those who turn constraints into breakthroughs from those who freeze in the face of adversity? It's not just intelligence or access. It's their disciplined ability to frame every limitation as a lever for innovation. Strategic optimists are not blind. They are not naive. They don't deny reality. They redefine it. They ask different questions. They reimagine possibilities. And that mental posture terrifies pessimistic realists because it opens doors they no longer believe exist. Why is this so powerful? Because perception precedes creation. You will never build what you cannot first see. If you believe you are surrounded by limits, you will act like you're trapped. But if you believe those same limits are riddles, you'll start finding keys, and the world will respond accordingly. So ask yourself, are you waiting for the world to show you opportunity, or are you training your mind to manufacture it? Because the mind that terrifies through its strength decides with speed, acts with precision, and sees with optimism so sharp that reality bends under its vision. Those who master strategic optimism do not see the world as it is. They see what it could become, and that singular perception alone rewrites what's possible. Where others see dead ends, they build new routes. Where pessimists seek justification for inaction, they extract blueprints for transformation. This is not about false hope. This is not positive thinking. This is architected belief, and it creates a presence, quiet but undeniable, that deeply unsettles those still bound by conventional constraints. When someone repeatedly converts obstacles into strategic assets, not once, but consistently, people feel it. They sense a reality-shifting edge they can't quite name, and that presence, it intimidates, because it forces one terrifying realization. Maybe the limits aren't real. Maybe they're chosen. So how do you build this kind of perspective? How do you train your mind to generate light from limitation? You begin by installing a systematic opportunity extraction protocol. The moment you encounter a challenge, resist the instinct to label it as negative. Instead, ask one question. Where is the advantage hidden inside this? Don't stop at surface logic. Dive into specifics. Map potential upside. Dissect every perceived weakness until you uncover strategic leverage. Next, install your possibility expansion methodology. This means deliberately exploring solutions that traditional analysis dismisses as impossible. You don't accept it can't be done. You ask, what assumptions is that statement protecting? Then you break those assumptions one by one. You question every limitation, especially the ones that feel most reasonable, because those are usually the deepest prisons. But above all, train the most potent discipline of all, future-back thinking. Don't start from where you are. Start from where you've already won. Stand mentally in your vision fulfilled, and reverse engineer the pathway back to now. Let the future pull you forward, not the past drag you down. This is how Jonathan Richardson rewired modern manufacturing during a period of economic paralysis. While global experts were writing reports, Explaining why innovation was impossible, he began creating systems by looking through the lens of imagined success. We didn't analyze constraints, he said. We reverse engineered from the outcome. Oh, every time his competitors documented failure logic, Richardson forced his team to ask, what if this problem is the doorway? What does this limitation allow us to do better, faster, cheaper? And inside that question, they discovered solutions no conventional mind had the courage to pursue. The result? Breakthroughs that economists labeled mathematically impossible. But they were only impossible from the old lens. So now I ask you, are you still allowing your current reality to govern your perception of what's possible? Are you mistaking realism for wisdom when it's just restriction in disguise? What game-changing opportunities might be sitting just behind your assumption that something can't be done? Because when your strategic optimism becomes unshakable, you don't wait for conditions to improve. You build what others are still waiting to be given. You become the mind that reorders circumstance to match the vision, not the other way around. Because the mind that terrifies through its strength doesn't obey limitations. It converts them. It bends the impossible into breakthrough. When your optimism becomes strategic, not emotional, not blind, but trained, something extraordinary begins to happen. You start seeing what others can't. You uncover possibilities hidden behind problems, pathways buried beneath perception. And you begin designing solutions that seem almost impossible to the average mind. While most people live in a loop of limitation, calling it realism, you begin to live in a world of leverage because your lens has changed. This is not about wishful thinking. It's about engineered perspective. It's about disciplining your perception to find the opportunity inside every obstacle. Study those who've transformed crises into careers, failure into fuel, setbacks into systems, and you'll find one thing in common. They chose what to focus on, because what you see is what you create. So let me ask you right now, will you commit to reversing your lens, to turning at least 3 current limitations into strategic opportunities through disciplined perception? Will you train your mind to default to creation, not complaint? Because the mind that terrifies through its strength is not the one that reacts. It is the one that reframes. And it's not born that way. It is built, brick by brick, through focus, failure, repetition, and refusal to quit. Every moment you resist distraction, every time you fight the old story, every time you rise early and act anyway, you are forging a mind that bends reality. So stop waiting for confidence. Stop hoping for strength. Build it. Own it. Live it. Forge a mindset so clear, so powerful, that even in silence the world listens. And if this message lit something inside you, don't keep it to yourself. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because one mindset shift can change an entire life. And if you believe in that, subscribe. We're building a tribe of unbreakable minds. A world powered by positive mental attitude, desire, faith, autosuggestion, and relentless action. Act, and keep acting, and you will lead yourself to success.